Welcome to Season 2 of Learning and Unlearning. Today, we're having a chill conversation about fatherhood, right? Something really, really deep, man, because like when I think about this topic, you just think about how prevalent the fatherhood issue is in the black community, especially among men. The issue about, men not being there at all when they have kids, right? Just the option to run away and kind of leave their family there, right? And leave the responsibility of raising children with women. And the issue of men being there, being very, very toxic, right? Like really passing on really terrible notions of masculinity to their boys. And as a result, when these kids grow up, when these boys grow up, they become the kind of men that we read about in the newspapers. And that's exactly what we want to deal with in this episode. So today we are having one of my favorite young black dads, fellow young black dad, Mkhize.
What's up, guys?
Right? Wagwan.
I want to say though, I've been waiting to say this because I've been waiting for one of my mates to have a second kid. He went double platinum.
Yeah?
He went double platinum. We needed to get him a plug with like two
Honestly.
Oh, dude, a plug and a cigar.
Why haven't we done that?
I don't know.
I mean, I'd like the plug to come with like a lot of nappies
Because they're expensive, right? Right?
Like a voucher at babysitting.
exactly. That should be the plug.
But Shan, so it's when you become a father, right? You begin to reflect on how you were fathered,
Yeah.
and there's a great level of wisdom that comes from that introspection, and there's also a great level of empathy that comes from that introspection, because I think the way I was fathered, so my dad was there for me, 100%, and he always tried, you know what I'm saying? He took me to my sports games, he watched me row in, Rudaplat there in Pretoria, and it wasn't easy, dude, just, being in a private school, being the only black dad sometimes there, because that's another conversation for another day, because, dude, black parents, watching your kid playing sport, there's not a lot of us doing that. But conversation for another day. So my dad's dad was not the greatest to him. He scammed him once or twice in terms of money, and he didn't marry my grandmother because of different ethnic groups and so on and so forth. But my dad was a very hard, staunch Zulu man. He was... Spilisintu like I.
Yeah.
Like
Traditional.
he was traditional Zulu man.
Yeah.
So I grew up being growing up with that very traditional fatherhood in me. But, going to a private school and more particularly when you start postgraduate work, where they encourage you to think independently, I began to question the way I was raised, and I began to look at and introspect at the way I was raised, because you need to do that dissemination process where you're like, I'm keeping the good, getting rid of the bad, and getting rid of the ugly. But the key is not to get rid of the bad and the ugly, but to understand where it comes from, and to understand, okay, look, my dad had these toxic traits that he inherited, or that unfortunately, because of the way he was fathered, he had. Right, and what I realized with my dad now is that if you want your dad to be a better grandfather, you yourself need to be a better dad.
Sure.
So as I became as my dad watched me, I think as he saw me become, not necessarily the better version of the dad that he wanted to be, but as he saw that, okay, I was, breaking away from the bad habits, and I was keeping the good that he taught me, and I was being a present black father, that also kind of encouraged him to be a better grandfather and also be a better dad to me now,
Yeah.
because the dynamics change when you become a dad.
Yes.
And we sometimes neglect, we think that, oh my gosh, my parents, they know it all. But like, guys, being a better dad to your kid makes your dad to you be a better dad to you as well. Because he's seeing you father.
That's real.
And it's
It also, and it makes you a more empathetic son.
Exactly. You never judge your parents because, guys, parents make mistake.
Yeah.
Boom, you know. But yeah, man, it's interesting to see, I mean, yeah, obviously he has these moments when he dips and, we make jokes and we're like, no, there's the traditional Zulu man jumping out again.
Yes.
That's hard to shake.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But like, there's moments when I'm like, oh, shucks. Especially because he has like a set talk on a radio station, right? A Zulu radio station. Yeah. And I hear his content and I'm like, this is not the same man that was talking 5 years ago. He would never say that.
Yes.
6 years ago or 7 years ago.
That's so powerful.
So as much as we're going to talk about my fathering journey, my fathering journey has also changed my dad's fathering journey as well.
That's really, really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, what Sia is pointing out right now is so powerful, especially around how your father becoming a grandfather changed his perspective. So I'm not going to start from like childhood, but I actually want to start from when my dad became a grandfather as well. So when my niece and nephew were born, the fundamental change in his character and in his ability to reckon with himself as a man, as a father, as someone who needs to be loving, patient, and compromising has been incredible. Like the dad that I've known over the last 2 years versus the first 24 years before that, I can honestly say they're fundamentally different people, right? There are some consistencies. For example, he's still a sacrificial dad, always been. He still loves his family, always been. But his approach has changed so much. He's much more concerned with things like personal character. Whereas as a father, like I feel like black dads like to raise us in a systematic way. A lot of them raise us in a systematic way. Whether you have 1 kid or 3 kids, it's like I just want to pay for things and send you all to school and make sure you're disciplined. But now that he became a grandfather, he's so obsessed with like peculiarities, like in each individual child. Sure. He knows that my brother's passionate about film, so he supports my brother as that. He knows that I love education, so he supports me in that regard. He knows what my sister's passionate about, supports her in that regard. And then on top of that are the 2 grandkids that he's now broken up into 2 distinct figures, whereas before it was more systematic. So I've seen that change, like how patient he's become, how more focused he's become, and I can agree with Sia in saying that it's all due to him becoming a grandfather.
Dude, I think, it's so weird, but the reflection or that change it can't happen with your own offspring. Yeah. For some reason, it has to only happen. Like, I don't know what it is, but maybe you guys can chip in as
closer to the mic this year.
But I think what I find is that when someone becomes a grandparent, right, and they see you parent, they realize, oh, shucks, this is what I shouldn't have done.
Wow.
Oh, shucks, that was not okay. Wow. Oh, shucks. Whew. Maybe I
approach it like this.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That by watching through you parenting, they see you. Kanti. I taught my child Inganyam to do this.
And I know he got it from me.
And I know he got it. Exactly. And then they're like, okay, let me do differently with the grandchild. So that I don't want to call it atonement, but
yeah, but it is, bro. It really is atonement. It's a form of atonement because it's progressive reflection, right? Isn't that the most important thing? Like that's what time gives you.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you were young when you had these kids and you were like facing direct pressure to provide for these kids and the conception of manhood was provision primarily anyway. Yeah. By the time you grow up and you get into another stage of your life, you're like, actually, fatherhood is much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
It's much more reflective, like, you know what I mean, than that. Yeah. It's more conversational, it's more intentional, you know? Sure, these are such brilliant insights. All right, so Dooms, from your side, man, give us your experience about being fathered.
Sure. I say sure like I wasn't expecting the question, despite knowing what the question was. I think if you'd asked me that 3 or 4 years ago, I'd say I wasn't, right? I wasn't fathered. Because my relationship with fatherhood is defined by absence, right?
Yeah.
If I have to define fatherhood and I guess imagine it, I have to do a lot of work to fill in blanks with my own imagination,
Sure.
with my own experiences with other people's fathers. But yeah, my relationship with fatherhood has always been one of absence. Before my father's passing, he was absent, and would show up for small things, right? Would show up because I had a bike rally at school and he'd buy me a bicycle. And I'm not even sure if I'm remembering that story correctly. My mother might have bought the bicycle. But it'd be little things like that, right?
Yeah.
The kind of thing that he knew I'd celebrate him for, to kind of make up for a long period of absence, right? The kind of thing a 6, 7, 8-year-old child would be like, yeah, he's not there, but he bought me a bicycle, right? So yeah, he's not there, but he bought a BMW and he came to show me, and he knew I love cars.
Like
so
events,
precisely. And I think he knew I'd forgive him for or not even note his absence, because that's what I know, right? That's all I know. But I think as time progressed and as I got older, we had a relationship where it was we had a bit of a relationship. I'd see him from time to time.
Yeah.
We'd speak quite a bit up until the point where he passed away. And then that's where the real work started on my part. It was that how I related to my father from that point onwards was one where I had to do a lot of work in trying to give him complexity and trying to understand the reasons he was the person he was.
At a very young age.
At a really, really young age.
Well, how old were you? Because, I mean, to do that for someone else, I mean, doing your own emotional hard labor is difficult, but to do it for someone else. So I'm asking, like, how old were you at this point when you were doing
I
this?
was, however old you are in grade 8.
So
14, yeah.
14.
And
My
I
goodness,
think,
that's
I'm not sure it's because I had the presence of mind to do the emotional labor and conceive of my father's complexity. I think it was just because it was I know there's nothing wrong with me, so it must have been something with him.
Yes.
Right. And I think it was to save myself from the pain of rejection, from years and years and years of rejection. And I think without knowing it, it did help me sort of understand the decisions he made, not because I'd make the same decisions in his shoes. God, I hope not. But to understand that he didn't exist as the person that he was in a vacuum, right? His conditions and his experience in his life and the way he lived it and the way he was forced to live it made him who he was, as is true for all of us, right? But yeah, like I say, that's when the real work began. And I had to sit there and conceive of this figure who's now absent, who can't speak for himself, as a complex individual, right? But in doing that, I have to assume 90% of the things, right? Because my mother's gonna hate me when I say this. My mother hates speaking about my father.
Your mother hates?
Hates speaking about my father. So even if and remember, I'm removed from his side of the family completely. Like I've got like my half brother who I speak to, but if I want to access a repository of memories about my father, it's incredibly difficult for me to do that.
I mean, I'm just curious. Like, did your mom ever tell you exactly why she doesn't? Or do you know why your mom doesn't?
I do. But I think I've always had the thing where I'm like, you can't even do it for my benefit. I get why it's difficult for you, but do you get why not hearing it is difficult for me? And I think that's always been a difficult thing for me to grapple with. It's still something I struggle with now. And I think because of that, I witness the discomfort when I speak about him, and because of that, that's not who I go to when I want to learn more about him. So yeah, but I think I've also had other father figures who've given a lot of color to my experience with fatherhood.
Yes.
I've got an uncle who might be the most present father in the world. I'm not sure what the statistics look like, but
He's way up there.
I'm not sure what who's where on the leaderboard, but he's definitely up there. His kids criticize him a lot, and I used to think, don't be hard on him, that's so weird, because at least he was there, right? And of course, like, they have their relationship with him, and I'll never understand that. So the criticisms are probably warranted, especially because they're also, like, they're not unreasonable people, you know, my cousins. And I think it's one of those things where you have to accept that you're not in that household, so it's not your experience. The experience is their experience. But my relationship with my uncle is one where any instance or any situation or scenario that I required him to show up, he's never not showed up. When I think of moments of having a relative or a family member or father figure watching me, I used to play rugby because I'm fast when I'm scared. When I'm scared. But when I think back to sports days, it's my uncle, shout out Papati, who used to drive to Boksburg to watch me play.
You played rugby in Boksburg?
I played rugby in the
you were
Eastern
hella
Circuit.
scared.
I was hella scared, right? So I was moving, my nigga. I was moving mine. Exactly. Where you have Butrand, where you have like 21-year-olds who shouldn't be in school anymore, still in school playing for under 16 teams.
The ID says 16.
The ID says 16. Don't ask for the ID though, because who do you think you are, right? So my uncle would show up for that, and almost religiously, and where my mother and I are both these incredibly stubborn individuals. I get it from her, and I think a part of her is like, why are you like that? And I'm like, what do you mean? That's weird that you'd say that. But I think my uncle has played an immense role in, I guess, translating the disconnects and the misunderstandings between my mother and I. So when my mother and I would have a massive fallout or misunderstanding, I'd get home and he'd be there, right? Or if he couldn't be there, it'd be a phone call in the moment where he needed to speak to me, and then he'd show up later. So he might be the most dependable human being I know, and because of that, how I relate to manhood is the responsibility to show up and be dependable.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful.
I have one, because, Thami speaks about his mom and, the difficulty with having the conversation around his dad. One day your mom's going to be a grandmother, right, at some point. And, you know how far your mother is with the healing process when it comes to what happened with her dad, with your dad, sorry. Do you think that not dealing with it or how she's dealing with it may impact how she grandmothers, especially if it's going to be a grandson?
Sure. So I want to start off by saying that I completely understand my mother's reasons for not being.
No, definitely we can't like your mom has her reasons, and we're not here to talk about or debate. But the reason I bring it up is because it also impacts how I view fatherhood, right? Because my mother's father was emotionally abusive, was physically abusive of my grandmother. So that's how my mother relates to fatherhood. The way my mother relates to men is you'd have to speak to her for that. So I completely get it. I don't know if it would impact how she grandmothers. I think it will, because we're the sum total of our experiences, and I know that to be true, especially for her. So it doesn't make sense for me to say it wouldn't impact how she grandmothers. I think I'm just not particularly sure how it would impact how she grandmothers. The reason I say that is because like you said before, I've never really wanted for anything, right? And like all of the things that I always conceived of being paternal duties and roles
my mother's fulfilled to the best of her ability.
Absolutely.
So if we're talking about showing up, if we're talking about being a protector, if we're talking about all of these ways that we conceive of providing, if we're talking about all these ways in which we conceive of fatherhood in the classic sense, right? My mother does those things. So it definitely would. I just don't know how.
Yeah.
I just think that I'm so happy that Dumi's like, at no point has he placed a burden on his mom to heal or expected her to heal. He's like, look, this is your journey. This is my journey. You know, and like, I mean, I think a lot of the times we're like, oh my gosh, why is my mom or my dad not healing from this?
Yeah.
I mean, I do all the time.
Yeah.
But to myself, right? I'll never be like, you really suck and you need to work through those.
So my question is then, I think, just to, because we're segueing very nicely into this conversation, how has it impacted your conception of manhood? And I think Dumi already answered this question. The way you were fathered, the way you were raised, the people, the men in your life, right? How have they impacted the framework that you have on manhood? Let's start with Sia, because Dumi answered that question already very well.
Yeah.
So, other than my dad, I think the next best father I had was also my uncle, Bapelela. When it comes to slaughtering an animal, he taught me all I need to know. You know? He said it goes in here, this is the upper limb goes in first. You know, everything that I know when it comes to uklabi slwane. You know, he taught me everything. You know, I remember when we had a bit of it, like whenever we'd have a tiff with my dad, like it would be my uncle to call me.
Wow.
You know, and he'd always call me to order, but it's the gentle approach that he has. And for me, I've had a lot of people that are not necessarily biologically related to me, because I believe that children don't necessarily have to come from you, but they can go through you.
They're raised by the village.
Exactly. So I've had a lot of other men who, especially when you become a young black dad, dude, who really, really are just... And for me, it was a former boss that I had. Well, we became friends now, and you know, he is old Grant Dodds. He's not working anymore now. He's still a rowing coach though.
Yeah.
And dude, he always checks up on me, and the advice and the wisdom he gives me when it comes to being a parent and building a home, and he'll always remind me that, look, it's you and wifey first.
Yeah.
It's you and wifey first.
Yeah.
And he's a white male. You know? We always think that, you know, the people that make substantial contributions to black fatherhood have to be black men. When in this instance, it's a black man, you know, even the women in my life that have made substantial contribution in the sense of motherhood, you know, and I'd say I'd put my supervisor up there, Tracy Sneeman, you know, like a white woman, you know, a middle-aged Afrikaans white woman, you know. So I've had some great examples in my life that the bad ones the effects of the bad ones are kind of negated.
Yes.
And I can kind of put that aside because, you know, when someone would bring in something toxic to me, you know, my uncle or my father or Grant would show me better. And I think it's so important that you have an array, or rather a variety of good male figures around you, because not each one has their strengths and weaknesses, right? What the one can show you, the one cannot. And it's not about making one better or more important than the other. It's just you're a complex human being. And
Absolutely.
If you want that complexity, you need that variety.
Yeah.
Of personality.
And relationships are complex, and networks are complex, and everything.
You need that around you.
Yeah.
So I've been very fortunate to have that. And the one thing that I can say, the greatest benefit of having those men around me is that it always forced me to hold myself accountable for my behavior.
Brilliant.
Because I think in our country, men get an allergic reaction when it comes to accountability.
Yeah. So Dumi speaks about, you know, the classic conceptions of masculinity.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in the black community, where we associate manhood with providing, with protecting, you know, with kind of being better or more superior to women, and all those kinds of things. And Bongs, what I want to ask you is, there's that classic conception that is almost unwritten, but we all know, right? did you find that conception consistent with how you were raised, or with the brand of masculinity that your dad represented? And if not, what were the differences? Especially the ones that you can take out from now, like that you're going to actually take and move forward with.
It's so weird because as a child, growing up, and it's only now when, like I said, my relationship with my dad is largely a retrospective reflection of, oh, that's what that meant. Oh, that's what that meant. Because when I was a kid, we were kind of going through the motions of dad is a workaholic, he loves work, and mom is a stay-at-home mom, and she's always present. And dad is this abstract figure, and mom's the one raising us. So if I'm honest, most of the life lessons that I was actively taught were from my mother. But the older that I get and I reflect back, I'm like, there are a lot of passive lessons that I learned from my dad. So to answer your question, I'd definitely say that those traditional ideas of manhood were definitely there, because my dad grew up without his dad, right? For a very long time. Actually throughout his whole life until the last 2 years of his life. And so growing up without his pops around meant that his conception of manhood was always, if I can do better than what my dad did, then I've done my job.
Sure.
It's that thing about, I think Barack Obama has a quote where he's, where Barack Obama is like, every man's either trying to live up to his father's expectations or surpass him, right? And so my dad's thing was, there were no expectations to live up to, so let me at least surpass him. So there's always this idea that like, if my dad wasn't there to pay for this, pay for that, at least I'll be there to pay for this and pay for that, and so on and so on. And so the only expectation I think he created of himself when we were kids was as a provider. So very traditional in that sense. As a result, the only expectation I had of him as a kid was as a provider. And in instances where there wasn't enough money at home, our family was badly affected by the 2008 financial crisis, right? We lost everything in 2008. And it's so weird how something that happened on Wall Street affected what my manhood journey from then on. Because when the money started drying up and my dad wasn't able to provide like he was before, it was like, well, he's always at work and now there's no money. Well, I guess I don't have a dad anymore. And that thing was saying earlier on about how, some families have an FU dad. But I had that with my dad at the age of 14. I didn't say FU to him. I'd never swear. I respect him immensely. He's still black. He's still black.
And you want to live, right?
I wanted to live.
He's black and I like being alive.
And so, but I did have that moment with him where at the time it felt right. I was like, well, you're not doing your job. You're not doing this. And this is what you're supposed to be doing. And blah, blah. And again, I only fixed this in 2019. So for 11 years, my conception was just this guy failed. He failed in 2008 and he hasn't recovered since then. And so my job is to improve on that. Right? So his dad wasn't there to pay for things. He was there to pay for things for the first 14 years. Then he wasn't. I want to pay for things and go to sports matches. But what I wasn't working on was some of the other intricacies of fatherhood. It's not just about paying for things and going to sports matches, which is what I wanted. But then it's also about, dealing with your mental health, dealing with all of these things that
normalizing dealing with your mental health.
Normalize dealing with your mental health. And so he was a traditional dad in that sense. And it did lead to our breakdown as a result when I started coming of age. But when I became an adult, I was able to look back and say, I get it. I get your trauma. I get my trauma. And like I said, since he became a granddad, he's been incredible at reckoning and atoning as well. He's atoned so much for who he was in the past. And I've also had to, forgive him for all of those.
Guys, do you guys think it's possible to have that moment of, I get your trauma, I get my trauma?
It is.
Without having a breakdown. That's what you had with
your pops,
Yes, but without having that breakdown. Like, I also had that breakdown. Why must we have that breakdown for us to have that
So I think I'm proof that that's possible. Because I didn't have a breakdown. He wasn't there for me to have the breakdown. I had to do that in retrospect by myself with a lot of assumptions. So maybe I manufactured and created and fashioned the breakdown in my head.
But if I can say, I think a lot of the work then comes down to you, the child, right? The child that's that's well read, the child that's in the discourse, in the culture, that has the vocabulary, right?
Yeah.
You have to recognize that you have to take more responsibility than your parent. Actually, we had this conversation off air, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as you get to that place where you're like, okay, sharp, look, there's so much that I'm going to have to heal from as a result of the way I was raised. And the person that raised me is complex, right? And wasn't existing in a vacuum. I like the words that you used there. You know, then I think it's possible to have that without a breakdown.
Without a breakdown.
Right? Because then it's like having a breakdown with yourself. Like,
The breakdown's got to be
collapsed.
here.
Yeah. Everything
Without
collapses in here.
damaging this. with my son.
Absolutely.
My question is it possible to have that reckoning if you have the kind of relationship where accountability only flows in one direction?
Sure.
I think the entire aha moment is founded on accountability.
Yeah.
Without accountability, then guys.
And your father's willingness to be held accountable.
Exactly. No, I think his willingness to accept accountability.
When does that come? So that's my question as well, because, you know, like, I've also had a relatively good relationship with my dad, like, growing up as a kid. Our relationship started to, like, really get tense and difficult over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And now we're at a place where, you know, there was a breakdown, right? That's the problem, right? It gets to a place where there's a breakdown, but, like, what you guys are making me realize is that the breakdown probably comes at the moment where the child wants accountability for something.
Yeah.
Sure.
Where they don't want to be the only one being held accountable. Like, hey man, I think I've crossed the age where accountability flows from me only. Do you see what I'm saying? I think it can be mutual. So I'm asking you, Sia, like, from your perspective, especially seeing your dad as a grandfather as well, and I think your dad's pretty much older than my dad as well, right? Like, when do you think it starts? Like, how organic is it to get to a place where you don't see each other as peers? No. But there is a sense that you're an adult, I'm an adult, right? Yeah, that's
So,
when it really starts.
I mean, I think you and I have had this chat, and
Should have
I mean,
recorded that chat.
It's so it's so sad what I'm about to say, but this is my take on it, and I don't think you can have that mutual understanding that I'm an adult, you're an adult. Accountability is going to flow both ways. If you're still living under my roof, eating my food, using my electricity, bathing and drinking my water. Hikwam.
Yeah.
This is my house.
Yo, that's so
The
sobering.
bond is in my name. You
Yeah.
know? And unfortunately, it is the sad reality that when you have your own job, your own money, your own house, your own everything,
You get to make your
then they
rules.
will see you as a man.
Yeah.
Then you can sit down with your man and be like,
You're chatting now, dog.
you know?
Wow.
Yeah, well, because at the moment, they're going to say, I know. They're saying, I'm not going to apologize to a child.
Yeah.
Because, but
A child
when
I'm feeding.
a child I'm feeding.
Because where were
So
you?
even if you're 30 and they're still feeding you, they're
it's
still
what,
giving you this. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Once you're grand on your own and you're fully financially independent, which is a sad reality considering the socioeconomics of South Africa.
Yeah.
You know, to attach respect and dignity to something as fleeting as money. You know,
Especially in the black community.
guys, that can only change with us.
Yeah.
That can only change with us. Like us, we're going to respect our kids. Which as in, if my kid is upset, just because I'm feeding him, that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that I own him.
Yeah.
I think it's that shift in parenting from
Sure.
you're not a. I always say to people that you're not. This child is not yours. You're a custodian of God and your ancestors' blessings. You know, so I think that shift of ownership to custodianship when it comes to parenting is what it's gonna lead to. But for now, guys, hambe uthole imali and then
Yeah. From ownership to custodianship. Dude.
That's such a
Frank, yeah.
I'm going to use that at least 3 times this week.
So I want
please reference me, guys.
Put it in, please.
I just wanna reference what Sia's saying now, because the stuff about, you know, building your own and then being given a seat at the table is so powerful, because when I had my moment of reckoning with my own dad, this happened. It's weird because it had, like, Thami and myself and Dumi had been talking about my relationship with him for a while. And then this one time, Thami and I were doing work in Durban. We're at Nando's, we're eating chicken licken, and Tammy's randomly like, "Yo, are you
eating chicken licken?"
No, sorry, chicken, sorry. And Nando's eating chicken.
Like, did you not pay attention to the sign that says only food in this establishment may be enjoyed
Where
here?
there's chicken, there's licking. That's the problem.
We're not,
You know what I mean? That's the thing. Let's be honest, bro.
Don't worry about it. So, this one time, Tammy's like, "Yo, are you ready to do the work with your dad?" I'm like, can't we just have this chicken and leave?
Yeah.
We're doing a project, for goodness sake. And then, what was weird about the moment in which he brought this up was the moment in which I was feeling the most grandiose and big as a man. We're making money. I'd moved out of home. Dumi and I were about to travel East Africa. I was a baller. That's who I was in my head, and even materially. So Thami then brings it up, and I'm like, I don't really want to do it emotionally, but I have the bank to do it. I have the repertoire to do it. I did it. About 7 months after that conversation at Nando's in Durban, I actually did hit him up. But at the time, I'd be lying if I said I hit him up because I wanted to heal. The healing only happened after a while. The only reason I hit him up is because I was like, I think I can finally hold him accountable with bank.
Yeah.
With what I built. Like, I can finally...
So you would have never done that if you didn't have the money.
If I was still broke, or if I was still a full-time student exclusively, I don't know if I would have done that.
So you said, "Here's my money, now explain."
I'm like, okay.
Because again, it's the ticket.
It's the ticket
to accountability.
Right, and it's so sad because only after we started, again, I'd be lying to myself if I said I did it because I was emotionally mature.
But
Yeah.
why is it so? For me, I can't fathom the fact that we have to compromise our healing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because the bank balance is not alright.
So that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, is there a middle ground for people who do have to depend on their fathers? What happens then?
So again, I must say this, right? Yo.
Time.
We're not time even. I think we're still doing good on time, but we're not necessarily saying that in order for you to have a good relationship with your pops, have money.
Not at all.
We're giving you our experience.
We're just elaborating.
We're
on that,
elaborating.
and
We're unpacking the
it.
context as to, in the status quo as it stands, it seems like in order for you to get to a place where you can be respected as an adult, your complexities, your thoughts, your views, your emotions are respected, it's when you come to a place where you can be a man that provides and you can demonstrate manhood in the classic sense. That's what we're saying. And we're saying that those experiences are part of what hurt us, bro.
We're saying they're a problem.
Yeah, we're saying they're a problem.
They're
We're
how
saying
it is,
that's why,
but it's a problem.
like why we're slow to heal right now.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'll tell you a story on the contrast.
Yeah.
My relationship with my pops, I think was always good. I think from childhood, he's always seen me like as an achiever.
Yeah.
He's always been like a mentor, like, yeah, dude, you gotta do it. But he's been like a hard mentor, like a hard mentor. You know, so I didn't always like him because of that. So I'd always preferred my mom's counsel. But like when I thought of like the real like vocational things that I had to do, decisions that I had to make regards to career and all those things, my dad would be there for that. My dad would even be there to counsel me on relationships and all those kinds of things, right? But I think when I started to experience a lot of friction from my dad and when the relationship really, really started to shake was when my business started collapsing and I lost everything. Yeah. And I had to move back home, right? Again, my dad is not aggressive, so it wouldn't be like, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. Why didn't you finish your degree? This is why you're in this situation, blah, 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 right? Yeah. But I think it was having to go back home to feel that weight of judgment from the other man that runs this home, right? Here comes this man with a wife, with a child gonna bring in his wife and his child in my home? Do you see what I'm saying? It becomes like a tension that's not explicable in any moment. Genuinely, I think the reason why I'm having the confidence to even have this conversation is probably because there's a bit of financial recovery on my side. And I feel like, okay, I qualify again, right? And I'm not sure. I think what I'm interrogating right now as I'm speaking to you guys is how conscious or how subconscious this issue or this notion is, right? Because I think if it's super like front of mind, one can actually tackle it properly and get to a place where they can have these kind of conversations without money or without a sense of status, right? Especially the traditional patriarchal status. You know what I'm saying? That we kind of lean into when we want to be having these conversations with our dads and the father figures in our lives, right? But like, moving from that one, I think, damn, we need a part 2. No lie, because like that chat alone, bro, is an episode. You feel me? And there's so many daddy issues are a big deal. But like, from here, Sia, right? You have the vocab. Your son is turning 2. And your daughter is 3 months old. Right? They are infants, Munna. They are very, very young. So what's the framework you're going to be using raising them? What's especially distinguish between the son and the daughter? Because I only have a son and I can't wait for a daughter. So like, put us on.
So I think the first framework I'll be using is that I'm going to maintain that standard of culture in the home when it comes to respecting isintu nesiko and traditions. But we need to, the way I apply or teach my son culture is to understand the spirituality behind it. Because once you understand the spirituality behind it, you'll then begin to see how, if you're not feminist, you will have to watch your culture die. Because the way it is being executed at the moment is to perpetuate misogyny and patriarchy. So to teach my son that you can be a feminist Zulu man. I know it sounds contradictory, but
right now it sounds contradictory.
Right
but
now,
at some point it won't.
It won't. Right. And to maintain those standards of, his name is Zazi, Z-A-Z-I, which means know yourself. So identity is so important to us. When I say us, I mean him and his mom, my mom and his mom and I. And that's the first thing culturally. And then secondly, it is for him to understand that his masculine identity stems purely and wholly on himself. He should never look for validation when it comes to it's no one's responsibility to make him feel like a man. If you don't have the courage to do ballet because you're worried about what your boys will say, then don't be a dad. Don't procreate. If you're going to still worry about these schemes about then don't be a dad, right? I think the one thing, if we can do one thing for all our young sons, is to teach them that masculinity and the feeling of being a man comes from here. And that no one can give you that stamp of approval. Because people do very toxic things looking for approval of their masculinity from their dad. And I want my son to understand that never do things for me or to impress me.
Or to prove anything.
To me. And then once he understands that my dad, right, I don't have to prove anything to my dad. The rest of the world falls into that category automatically. The only person I have to prove anything to is myself.
That's so profound.
That's
so profound,
My daughter, the exact same thing. But I think with my daughter, I want her to be unapologetically strong. Unapologetically fierce, right? And that because the way, being black and a woman, the double burden that she will have to carry, You know, hopefully society is transformed by then. But for now, it's a double burden that she has to carry. And that she must have the courage to fulfill her life according to her own standards. If she doesn't want to have a kid, then that's fine. If she doesn't want to get married, then that's fine. Right? She doesn't have to be a certain type of makoti. She doesn't have to be a certain type of mother. You know, the same way as Zazi can be a stay-at-home dad. It's okay if he wants to be a house husband. You know? So the most important framework is teaching your children independence, and that validation must never come from anyone, and that they shouldn't prove anything to myself or their mother. I think once we free them from those shackles, I think a lot of people, a lot of adults, right, are still, I need to show them. I need to show my mom and dad. Mom and dad are late. Gogo and Granny are long dead, but they're still like, I need to show them. They must see how much money I've made. They must see my power. You know? And how many people suffer as a result of that? You know? But if we live in a world where I don't need to show anything to anybody, I'm secure in my masculinity, I'm secure in my identity, that, you know, even if everybody in this room doesn't think highly of me, that's okay. Because I sleep with myself only at the end of the day.
Yo, really, really powerful. Because at the end of the day, masculinity is not necessarily about. Right now, it's attached to its patriarchal definition. Right. And in many ways, it's misogynist definition. But if you take it down to what it ought to be, it just ought to be a regular part of humanity and identity. That's it. It just needs to sit right next to femininity. Right? The way you're raising your son and the way you're raising your daughter should be equal. That's it. Right? There's a masculine and there's a feminine energy, and they're just part of the human civilization, the human culture and everything. And I think that's where we're heading towards, and I found that so profound. Mr. Frank, you finna have kids one of these days.
Look, my papa not next week.
If it comes out next week,
No, that's a problem.
you have a problem.
Yeah, no, that's a bit of an issue. Number of processes counseling for. But I think for me, it's also quite a profound thing. Like for example, and the reason why I think one's faith or one's spirituality is so important is my understanding of God, for example, has always been linked to my understanding of my father. But it was only when I was able to detach those two that I was able to set a very objective standard and say, here's the type of man I'm supposed to be, and this is why we all kind of fall short of that, right? And so the goal isn't to be better than my father or to impress him or to supersede him or to blah, 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 blah. It's just to meet this higher standard that says none of you will ever be perfect, and that's okay, right? So for me, I think the one thing that I do want to take away is just being a loving and serving type of father one day. I think that's the most important thing that I've taken out from all of this. Firstly, understanding that it's not about being perfect, it's about coming with your imperfections and but striving to be a servant, number one. Right? Look, I have no experience in being a dad, but one thing I've learned from being an uncle is they've been growing up, it's so easy to criticize the uncles around you and say, oh yeah, this one did this and this and this wrong. But when I find myself with my niece and nephew, there are many instances where I find myself falling into those very same habits that I used to look down on. Things like negligence, right? How you behave in front of kids, the things that you say, how mindful you are of your words and your actions, those things matter. And it gets to a point where you need to stop being selfish about, I'm going to live my life and live my truth when there are people watching you. And so if you're not demonstrating to them that life is about being a strong, faithful, and loving servant to those around you, if you can't shake that off, that you're not just living for yourself, I think you're one step closer to becoming the type of man that you are. So for me, being an uncle is almost like training. It's been extremely, extremely difficult. Nice. I'm not gonna lie.
And you've had 5 years of this training.
5 years, yeah. And it was at first it was my nephew, and I kind of took that for granted. And then when my niece was born, this is gonna sound weird, but for example, like we all became woke in 2015, right? But and I'm trying to say this as respectfully as possible, but like a lot of feminist theory only became concrete for me when my niece was born. And I know that that's a problematic thing to say in the world, because people are like, well, you shouldn't base it on your relation to people. You're right. But before...
But it's functional.
But
it's functional.
Everyone has a different trigger.
Right. Before then...
The fact is, the trigger's there. That's what's most important.
Yeah, so
don't worry about that, yeah.
So for me, like, I don't want to... I'm not trying to say it in a problematic way. I'm trying to say it like, before then, I was just a dude existing in a world that was built for me, in a world that protects me, and a world that listens
and you
to me.
happen to know the theories.
And so, right. So knowing the theories definitely made me a good ally in terms of how I performed. But as far as a change of heart, right? I really wish I wish the theory changed my heart. But it was when she was born, I was like, wait, if the world is built to serve me, what does that mean for her? So yeah, essentially, man, as I was saying, I really wish that it had worked, differently. But I can say that the lessons that I've learned have allowed me to even apply all of the vocab and the theories that I've learned over time. Because I think as millennials, we're so good at absorbing language, but very bad at doing the transformation that comes with absorbing that language.
We never actually talk about it.
We never
functionality.
We never, like, we always go on about we're going to be better parents. Like, good vibes Twitter, we're going to be better parents than that. Let's manifest better families. Let's do the, right. We're good at
hashtag.
Hashtag, right? Yeah, we're trying to manifest a lot, but I can, like, the one thing I've learned about being an uncle is that it really takes blood, sweat, and tears, and actual practical work.
Thank you.
Learning to love someone, learning to serve them, learning to behave properly in front of them, and understanding that you've lost your life now. Not in a bad way, also. Like, it's not, but you've lost what
Your life's about different things.
It's about different things now. Whoever you were before, the things you could say at the dinner table in front of your family, the jokes you could make, the what. It's not about you anymore. Like, that part of you needs to be dead, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so for me, that's been the change of heart I've experienced as an uncle. And as a dad, going, like, in future, I'd really like to apply those things as well as I can. But I feel so blessed for having been an uncle and exercise those things. So yeah.
Sure. Powerful.
Yeah.
Dunes?
So the only thing I've reconciled about fatherhood is that I don't want it at the moment.
Yeah, dude.
But
That's wisdom.
Yeah.
That is wise.
just because I think we all have to recover from our parents, right?
Yeah.
But if I had a kid now, that kid would have some work to do. You know what I mean? Like, it would, so that's what I've resolved at the moment. But I do think that conversations like this, the work I've done as an individual, the work we've done together, has to find manifest in my relationship with my children, my relationship with my partner, and my role in my family, right? Otherwise, it's all for nothing, it's all for no. I do think, though, that... So I don't have a lot of children in my life. I have a couple, but I'm not particular.
Yours?
No, but I don't have a lot of children in my life, but I have, like, nieces and nephews who I see when I see. I do need to make more of an effort with my nieces and nephews, but I think how I've decided that I'm going to relate to them is acknowledge that they're not fully critical, fully formed human beings, but they're human beings in every intent, right? And for every purpose. So when my 3-year-old niece says, no, don't do that, right? It's not less valid because she's 3 years old, right? When my nephew says, I don't like that and I'm not going to eat it, sometimes it's good for you and you need to shut up and eat the thing, right? but sometimes it's valid, right? And I think what I've decided I'm going to do with my children, to the extent that I can, to the extent that it's good for them, because ultimately I have to parent and not, like, just be a person's friend.
Fine line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But respect and acknowledge the fact that this is a person who whose relationship with authority and power I want to be different to how I was taught to relate to authority and power. Who I want to have self-awareness from as early an age as possible. Because we were talking off air now about how in black families we're not taught to dream. We're taught that we are at the mercy of institutions and powers and structures and systems that exist outside of us. And I want, if there's one thing I want my children to take from my parenting when it happens, is that they have complete power over themselves, and that's it. Yeah.
Sure. Yo, really, really powerful insights, gents.
Thami the puppy.
Yeah, ish, like as a puppy right now, right? Then I have to think about these things all the time. I think from the first place, man, again, it's back to, God created us equal and equal in dominion. So it's important for me to raise my child, my son, and my future daughter in such a way that they have that in mind, right? They have dominion and civilizing and making the world better in mind, right? But in order for them to have that in mind, that being front of mind, the way in which the nuances, the way in which I raise them on a daily basis, the conversations that I have to be, positive, right? Have to be from a place that is healed.
Yes.
Right? And even I'm not gonna be perfect, right? I'm not gonna come into the equation perfect at any point.
Yeah.
But I need to always have the intent to heal, the intent to be better, so that by the time they have a reckoning on their own parenting, they don't think about the way they were raised as setbacks in any way.
Yeah.
Again, I can't totally control and achieve that, right? But I aspire towards it.
Yeah.
And again, it's about the active contribution towards that ideal. So at the end of the day, gents, we're here striving for equality. I think we spoke about Neo Mohopa's article a couple of weeks back about the power of being married or being a spouse to a feminist, because it means that your masculinity is freed.
Yeah.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
So can I.
So you don't have that pressure of classic patriarchy, classic misogyny. No, you actually have the pressure to be you.
Yeah.
That's the real pressure.
And the best version of you.
And the best version of you.
And that's possibly why there was just on a side note, there was a study done and they found that men who were house husbands were happier than those who were not house husbands.
Yeah. I can get, it makes sense.
We want to be happy, and perhaps one of the biggest driving forces of mental illness amongst men is this conflict, because our desire to just be free of these shackles of patriarchy.
Yes, because we are also oppressed by the same system that we
perpetuate.
And we perpetuate. But by the time I married Boosie, by the time I was even friends with Boosie, right, I was like, whew, I feel free. And I want that same freedom to be afforded maturely to my son as well.
Yeah.
Not just as an epiphany suddenly, but from jump. He's always been free. Like Sia said earlier, always been free to think. And if you're thinking dominion, you're thinking about making the world better the whole time. You're
Absolutely.
free to think about that, as opposed to being but how am I gonna chow these girls, or how am I gonna get this money so that I can show them, blah, 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 blah. Those are dying trends, right? Or those are trends that have to die. And it's up to us to kill those trends. Gents, with that, thank you so much for your time. Sia, thank you so much for coming on.
It's been incredible,
man. It's been so good.
So insightful. It's
so insightful.
Shocking.
Wow, that's insane. The kids, if you're watching, this was Yo, this was for you.
Yeah.
I was even the dads or
Yeah.
be dads. Or
You need to go home and make Zazie a Spotify account and get Zazie listening. Yo.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so this has been the end of our first episode, guys, in our new season.
Yeah.
A big shout out to the Engage podcast team for putting this episode together. Shout out to Busi Mkhize Boy, wifey, for putting together all the digital marketing material. Shout out to Tato and Tabo for putting together the technical aspects of it. And shout out to all you gents for being part of this experience. Thank you.
Thank you.